Welcome back. There may be changes in this terrible government over the next few months. There's increasing talk of a cabinet reshuffle. I don't suppose that, unfortunately, Rachel from Accounts will go yet. The Chancellor is always difficult to get rid of for any Prime Minister. Well, first of all, Isabel, what are your thoughts? We're going to talk about Lisa Nandy. Apparently, too many colleagues feel she's very lazy. She only does 2 days a week, they say. I don't know the truth of this. Certainly, I believe she's been very negligent presiding over the decline of the BBC. She, in effect, has not done enough to tell the BBC you're allowing your newsroom to descend into anti-Semitism, into anti-Israel hatred, which that should be a damn job, and she's doing nothing about it. As usual, Labour people, socialists, terrified of tackling or clashing with the public service broadcaster. She hasn't done enough there. Also, Bridget Phillipson, apparently Keir's very upset with what he sees as her mishandling of the academy school situation. He thinks she has been very remiss in her dealing with that situation, so she could go. I think Keir Starmer probably feels that Bridget Phillipson is a bit too combative. She's a serious class warrior, obviously waging war on public schools, etc., etc. So I think his centrist instincts rail against the likes of Phillipson, and I hope they do. But before we discuss those two, we haven't got too long, but what do you make of the fact that Starmer's communications chief, Matthew Doyle, has suddenly quit, gone without further notice? He's been in charge of the sort of public PR operation at Downing Street for 9 disastrous months. He says it's time to hand the baton on to a new pair of hands. I think he has been resigned, as they say in politics. He's been told to sling his hook, because it's typical. You see, people like Starmer don't get it. You should put proper journalists in charge of your communications operation. They understand how the papers work. They understand how the TV stations and the radio stations work. Matthew Doyle didn't have a clue, and the disaster has been horrible for us all to behold. So I think he's been given his marching orders.
Well, a couple of things. First, really quickly, because I know we don't have much time, I do want to say, because I was very disparaging about the police in the last segment, I just want to acknowledge that a lot of police officers are absolutely furious as well about having to carry out these orders. And I'm sure many of them are incredibly frustrated about being sent on stupid missions to arrest people who don't need to be arrested. Having parked that, I would say about Matthew Doyle, he is a very long marcher as a Labour apparatchik. I actually remember dealing with Matthew Doyle during the Blair years. So this is a very experienced behind-the-scenes operator. He is charmless, and you're right, he's never worked, to the best of my knowledge.
Useless as well, I would suggest.
Let's just judge.
He's made a real cock-up of it, hasn't he?
Yeah, let's judge the results they're getting. I mean, this administration gets the most terrible press every day, and that's because it is completely useless and is failing on all of its core offers. So I don't think most of our listeners will care too much about Matthew Doyle going. What they'll care about is that the government continues to fail, and no amount of spin. I mean, no spin doctor could possibly make what this government is doing look good. So to that extent, maybe we should feel sorry for Matthew Doyle. How could he possibly succeed, given the plate he's been, the dish he's been served? It was never going to be possible to make it taste.
Sure. Well, let's quickly talk about Lisa Nandy. As I say, the word is that Starmer and the gang think that she's rather lazy. They're saying, not their words, not mine, that she's only putting in a couple of days a week. And I think where she's been very remiss is with the BBC. The BBC is sliding. Its journalism is plummeting into a kind of weird Jew-hating abyss. And I think the Culture Secretary's job should have been to do something about this, but she stands meekly by and does nothing. Her response to the Olympic Committee Committee's outrageous failure to protect women in sport in the Olympic Games, particularly in boxing, where we saw in the summer that horrible spectacle of, you know, blokes beating up women in the boxing room. She just said, oh, well, it should be done sport by sport. She's just toothless and useless, and now it seems lazy. So she may go. And also apparently Bridget Phillipson, who even Keir Starmer feels is a little bit too left-wing for his liking. I suppose the one we'd really like to see go is Ed Miliband. But your thoughts about the two women, and maybe Ed?
Well, my thoughts on Lisa Nandy is I can't think of a single interesting or impressive thing she's done. I rather like her personally, but I can't think of anything that she's done in her time in the job. So I think she's an easy target. As for Bridget Phillipson, I would love to see the back of her. This is somebody who's presided over an absolute disaster in her ideological class warfare. You know, she's done this thing to private schools. And what really shocked me, but I suppose didn't surprise me in a way, was that despite this policy, she has never visited a single private school, despite having imposed this existential tax on the entire sector. And as for her assault on academies, that is a complete disgrace. And, you know, for schools like Michaela, the best performing school in the country, to feel under threat as a result of her proposals is a travesty. And I hope she goes, but I also hope David Lammy goes, because he's also useless. I mean, there's a long list of useless...
Well, what about Ed Miliband is useless and extremely dangerous. I mean, one does hear that he may not be long for this world in terms of the cabinet.
Yeah. I'd be surprised. He'd be a dangerous. You'd be a dangerous enemy, I think, for Keir Starmer. If I had to bet on it, I would take survive, I'm afraid.
Indeed, but of course, if they get rid of the two women, that will be par for the course for Labour, because if they stuck around, there could be a sort of outside chance that one day Labour might have a female leader, but, you know, probably not this century.
Probably not. Well, our Ange, I think, has got a good claim to staying in her job. She is still the most interesting and character.
Interesting, yeah. Loves to go on safari, by the way, when she goes to Ethiopia.
Oh, let's not talk about Ethiopia, please.
I want to go and see the lions. No, Angela, you're working. Can't I go on safari? No, Angela, you can't. You're representing your country. I'm sorry, you're not on holiday. Anyway, enough of Ms. Rayner.